James, you and we've known each other for quite some time. What's your recording of when we first met? You got any memory?
No, I've stayed in your home. I've I know it was in Buff, and at one of the NBUF conferences, so far back, I couldn't put amount of years on it. It just seemed you're one of those persons like Renoka that I've always known. First World Alliance in New York. Then we were all around when ASCAC was given birth to. And we knew each other before there was an ASCAC.
Right. Yeah, I can't.
That's it.
Yeah.
And I was saying that NBUF, your organization, was the leading educational organization in the country at that time, in the 70s and the 80s. That was before there was ASCAC, before any of those things came. NBUF was the one putting on the education forums, addressing different political and education issues. And that's where most of us met, attending those conferences.
Right.
And we watched the other things evolve, you know.
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, I remember you from interacting with you in the National Black United Front and maybe earlier. And also with your buddy, Leonard Jeffries. And yeah, around the educational movement, and a brother who passed a few years ago, G2 Weusi, who was a part of a team of 5 of us who founded the National Black United Front, and he was the architect, and he was pretty well trained in his skills from CORE, though he was not a leader in CORE. And that's, as you know, where I got my spurs in organizing. So that African-centered educational movement that you talk about is relevant for this conversation because that was the major project the National Black United Front came out with. It was one that I had to fight to get the organization to adopt. We had a lot of struggle, and finally they came on board. And that movement, along with the Afrocentric movement in general, had a major impact on the hip hop generation. You know, that they acknowledge it, that along with the Million Man March, these were turning points for them in their generation. So, and I recall being in New York, hearing John Henry Clarke speak, and he did a riff. He said, I'm the son of a Baptist minister. He said, I start with the topic, depart from it, and come back. And Dr. Patricia Newton was sitting next to me, one of our real giants, and she said, that's concentric logic. And I said, I'm going to quote you on that. So in my book, The Mother Principle, I quote her, concentric logic, because that's how Black people think. We don't think A to Z, you know, we zig and zag. And that was John Henry Clarke. So yeah, so main thing I would say about you, James, is that I've always respected your sincerity and the fact that you're rooted, and you're rooted in struggle. You've been involved in a lot of different movements and activities, but you're rooted in South Carolina. You know what I mean? That's a special place for Black people in the United States. That would be like Egypt for Black people in Africa. Right. That is like the heart of African culture. And I come out of just the opposite. I come out of the Fillmore. It was very Black, but I was raised in a white community for a good 14 years after that. You know what I mean? So I had to come back to my consciousness through a movement, but you came out of the depths of South Carolina that has strongest African roots in the United States. And what I like about you is your integrity more than anything. You're a good brother, and you're out there helping people. And then what I really like is you matured, trying to catch up with me in age, is the wisdom, brother.
Yes,
so I expect to get some insights out of this discussion. I'll be taking notes. You hear me?
Well, I'm learning from you because you authored this extraordinary book that the world really needs to see, you know? And it's called The Integration Trap, the Generation Gap. And it's a book that we've slept, that we really need to study and get an understanding of what's going on in our community. And when it comes to this question of the generation gap, we really need to study it more from an African perspective and from an African American historical reality perspective, rather than from the normal European blueprint of what generation gaps are all about. Because ours is multicolored. Some of it is an excuse to collaborate for money, and some of it is real because of misinformation and disconnection between generations, which is not abnormal in the African American situation. We've been in a war environment for our entire experience in North America. And a big part of that war environment was to fragment the community. And a big part of that fragmenting is to control the socialization of the Black youth, of the African American youth, meaning that socialization being controlled by a non-African American population, indeed by the hostile population. And the degree to which we rely on the public school system for socialization is the degree to which we have given over to the enemy the socialization and training of the next generation of African American youth. And in that regard, the kind of connections that people would normally see in terms of intergenerational transmission of wisdom, which you see in the Jewish community, and you see very well in the Chinese and Japanese communities particularly, that gives a stability to the social order that you don't see in our community, because we are not in control of the socialization of the next generation. And we've left it to hit and miss.